Hi everyone, my name is Tori Janes-Bassett. I'm a researcher at Lancaster University and I'm working on the Ensemble project. I'm going to talk today a bit about inspiring care for soils and disentangling complexity in the soil system. So first of all, why are soils important? Well, it's not an exaggeration really to say that life on Earth depends on soils. Soils provide society with a whole range of benefits and they're often a bit of an overlooked asset in our environmental system. So one of the most obvious benefits that soils provide is food production. So soils either directly or indirectly provide around 95% of our food. But soils also provide benefits in the way of water regulation, so they can store a lot of water, which reduces the risk of both flood events and also drought events. And they also can filter a whole range of contaminants and pollutants, so have a key role to play in the regulation of our water quality. Soils also host a whole range of biodiversity, and it's not just above ground biodiversity, but below ground biodiversity. Soils account for over a quarter of the Earth's biodiversity. And soils also play a key role in climate regulation. When we think about mitigating climate change, we often think about sequestering carbon by planting a lot of trees. But actually, soils are the largest store of organic carbon in our Earth system. They store more carbon than all the plants and the atmosphere combined. So they have a huge potential to mitigate climate change and regulate our climate system. But despite their importance, soils globally are under threat, and soil degradation is now a significant issue across the globe, with over a third of land classified as moderately or severely degraded, and every year that area of soil that's degraded increases. So it's an ever-growing problem, and when soils degrade, their ability to function naturally and provide those benefits across food, water, climate and biodiversity is diminished. So this is a really urgent problem. And some of the issues we see facing soils include things like erosion. So we often might think that soil is an infinite resource, which isn't correct. Soils can take hundreds to thousands of years to generate. And when we remove natural vegetation cover from our soils, so if we, for instance, remove forest cover and put crops on our soil surface instead, we decrease that protective layer of vegetation, which can expose the soil to the erosive forces of rainfall, which then means the soil is eroded and removed, and over time that depth of soil will decrease, and that can happen at much faster rates than we can replenish the soil through regeneration. We also see issues, things like compaction. So from machinery, a natural soil will have a structure with lots of pore spaces which can contain gases and hold water. But when we compact the soil, we squish it down and really alter that natural structure, which has implications for water storage. We mentioned in terms of flood risk and drought risk, but also just changing the habitat for all those organisms that live within the soil. Obviously, in agricultural systems, we apply a lot of fertilizers and pesticides to our systems, which can result in pollution. But it's not just through agriculture, when we think of burning fossil fuels and releasing pollutants into the atmosphere, that doesn't just cause problems in terms of air pollution. Some of those pollutants can be deposited onto land and can result in changes in the chemical composition of our soils, resulting in things like acidification. We've also seen issues like salinization, so that's when we get a buildup of salts in the soil. This is particularly a problem in warmer climates where they irrigate, so they'll water crops. And if that's done with water containing salts, over time, as that water evaporates or is taken up by the plants, the salt is left behind, and gradually that salt builds up to what's known as a sodic soil, which becomes uninhabitable to a range of plants and organisms. Equally, we mentioned about that carbon store that soils provide, but over time we can see issues such as a decrease in soil organic matter. So when we remove plant material from harvesting, but none of that soil organic carbon or those nutrients are replenished in a natural system. As plants die, they would fall to the ground, they would decompose, and all those nutrients and carbon would go back into the soil. But when we move to an agricultural system, if we keep removing that plant litter away over time, we can decrease that soil organic carbon store. And soil degradation has been a long recognised issue. I mean, Franklin Roosevelt, one of the former US presidents, famously said, "The nation that destroys its soil destroys itself." And that was in response to the 1930s Dust Bowl events, which were a result of a combination of unsustainable agricultural practices and extreme weather events, which caused significant problems in relation to food security in America. So there's a real urgent need to understand how we can manage our soils sustainably, and particularly as some of the issues we're seeing facing soil degradation are a result of huge population growth. You know, from the 1800s to present day, the population has increased more than sevenfold, but this is projected to increase even further. So we're going to go from about 7.8 billion now to over 9 billion by the end of the next decade. So these pressures are only going to increase, and obviously as we increase population, we increase the demand for food production, which results in land use changes, so the clearing of natural land and more agricultural land. But it's not just the changing land use, it's the intensification of some of those land management practices to meet those ever-growing food demands. And equally, we're facing pressures such as changing climate, which is just going to further exacerbate some of these issues that we're seeing in our soil systems and change them in ways that we really need to understand how it's going to change our soils and how we can manage soils in a way where we can continue to ensure the sustainable provision of all these benefits. So soils are important, but they're also really interesting because they're really integral to our Earth system because they interact with so many parts of it. So I've mentioned that they're linked to nutrient cycling and biodiversity, linked to our atmosphere through the exchange of gases, and linked to our water cycling. So they really are entangled within our Earth system. So for instance, if we think about soil biodiversity, it's not just about having lots of different organisms and protecting different species. The soil biodiversity is also essential in terms of food security and nutrition because biodiversity also works to suppress a range of pests and diseases, and also soil biodiversity interacts with nutrient cycling. So we mentioned about carbon cycling and the carbon store in soils related to the regulation of our climate, but this is also linked with soil structure. So for instance, soil carbon is linked to aggregate formation. So aggregates provide more pore spaces in the soil, so more water storage capacity, which then also links to soil hydrology, and more pore space, more water storage space means less runoff, which then links to less erosion. So all these interlinkages between sort of the biology, the chemistry, the physics, and the hydrology of our soil systems makes them complicated, but also interesting. So how do we disentangle that complexity and understand soil change and predict soil change in the future? And this is what some of our research has been looking at, and we can use environmental models, which are essentially numerical representations of the environment based on our current scientific understanding. And we have lots of models of soil systems looking at the soil chemistry, soil hydrology, the biology and the physics of soil systems. But these models tend to be quite siloed. And when we're talking about the soil system and this entanglement, it often doesn't help us in terms of representing the true dynamic nature of our soil system. Equally, models aren't perfect. They're our best representation of reality and based on our current understanding. So some of our work has been looking at how data science can help further inform our process understanding and fill in the gaps. So for instance, some of our work has looked at how the cycling of phosphorus, that we've identified gaps in our understanding of phosphorus understanding. So we've been synthesizing available data and using statistical methods to try and understand and analyze that data to fill in some of the gaps and further our process understanding. Equally, we've been looking at how we can use different data science methods to quantify the uncertainty we have within our current understanding of soil systems. And data science, and used in combination with these process-based models, can help us fill in some of these gaps and create a more complete picture of our soil system. And then how do we put this into practice to halt and reverse soil degradation? Well, ultimately, models and data science approaches can help us further our understanding and how soils will respond to changes. So in terms of these future pressures like climate and land use and management, and what that means for food production and other benefits going forward. So we can use these models to forecast changes in our soil systems and find sustainable solutions going forward. And utilising new technologies like cloud computing, so internet-hosted platforms, allows us to bring a whole range of scientists together within this sort of interdisciplinary community, and enables us to work directly with practitioners and policymakers and farmers to communicate the science and help promote this more sustainable soil management. Thanks very much.